Trek session. It's been since 2018 that I owned a downhill bike. But moving this close to Whistler, I knew I would have to rethink that. However, with the border closed due to COVID, it wouldn't be until the summer of 2023 that I finally put one together. My last downhill bike was a Trek session with 27.5-inch wheels. That bike saw mostly Colorado, but did make a trip to Whistler, so I have a pretty good baseline for the old compared to the new. This is the all-new high pivot aluminum session. I set it up with mixed wheels as I was not looking for all-out straight line speed, but more for control in the steeps and a bit of fun on the jumps. I had just recently started playing with mixed wheels on trail bikes and I was hoping to keep the session from feeling too unwieldy. Let's talk about the new session. It's now compatible with dual 29, mixed, or dual 27.5, and is sporting 200 millimeters of travel out back, just a bit more than the outgoing bike. This bike is also only available in aluminum, as opposed to the old carbon flagship. It also is a new high pivot ABP layout with an idler to reduce pedal feedback, and seems to be proving itself on the World Cup circuit. It has the ability to set up the rear shock in a low or high progression mode, as well as the ability to change the geometry with the Link, but only when running the bike in the dual 29-inch mode. I built the session up from a frame, as complete bikes were hard to come by, and I figured I could spend all my money on the suspension and brakes. Starting with the suspension, the frame came stock with the Marzocchi bomber, and I knew it was a good starting point. I did have to upgrade the spring. The stock was a bit light, even in the progressive setting. I went with the Öhlins fork, as the reviews looked good, and so far I cannot say more good things about it. Setup took a bit longer than some more basic forks, but it was easier than adding and removing volume reducers like on a Fox or a RockShox. Next, I threw some Saint stoppers with 203 rotors front and rear. These have plenty of stopping power, and while I know not everyone is into it, I'm a fan of the feel. I don't want to say I cheaped out on the rest, but I had a carbon Bontrager bar and an I-beam saddle and post lying around. The Bontrager stem I think looks good and was inexpensive compared to some other options. Race face cranks are among the best for durability, lightweight, and are also pretty cost effective. I opted for the E13 wheel set with the included cassette, the heavy duty and super sticky E13 tires, and a Shimano Saint shifter and Z derailleur. This has proved to be a resilient build, even if the shifting does lack some precision and is a bit noisy when pedaling. Geometry-wise, the new session builds up very similar to other bikes at the sharp end of the spear on the World Cup circuit, like the Commencal or Santa Cruz. My size R2 has a head angle of 63 degrees, reach of 464, 639.5 stack, and a rear end at 441. That all adds up to a wheelbase of 1283. How's this bike? Well, going downhill is different for many people. We'll start with what the session is great at: high speed, chunder, and jumps. Well, sort of, but we'll get back to that. The first high pivot bike I rode was the Forbidden Dreadnought, and that was quite a while ago. I saw the benefit to the high pivot, but it really did not fit with everything else I was looking for. The session, on the other hand, this is exactly what the high pivot is for, and much more than that. On the high speed, especially when things got chunky, the rearward axle path was noticeable. When you hit a large rock with a fork, I was often surprised how well the rear wheel got over it. However, this bike still pumped over rocks and roots and pushed out of corners. Nice! It felt alive and wasn't just numb and stable. I attribute at least part of that to the mixed wheel setup. That's not to say it wasn't stable. This bike is extremely stable and planted when you needed it, especially under braking. Riding the Trek Slash compared to the Transition Spire, this was something I really became aware of about the two suspension designs. The session takes the traction under braking and turns it up to 11. After riding the Da Vinci chainsaw, I have to say there's something about the high pivot with the pivot around the rear axle that works so well when braking hard. Hitting jumps at speed, the session tracks and sails through the air, inspiring confidence when approaching a massive lip. Similar to the Spire, the Session is stable in the air, but maybe not as fun as it could be. Sometimes stability on jumps can have a negative effect on how fun it is to jump. I think this is obvious when you see that Trek riders like Kate Edwards have two different sessions, both with custom rear ends, one for hitting jumps and Fest Series-like events, and the other for the World Cup. What could this session be better at? There are two different directions downhill bikes can go: the more park/everyday rider bikes and the World Cup. It's not hard to find pictures of the World Cup team with different rear ends on their bikes.
Nothing to it.
This could be an issue with how the suspension works, or more simply to negate the noise/feeling of the idler pulley. This was definitely a letdown, as the design and integration of the idler looks so good, but never felt as smooth as I would like. I also tried out a friend's stock build, and I can't say it was any smoother. Either way, the Session is built for speed. But could it go faster? I'm not riding at that level, so I can't say.
Woo! Yo! Woo! Nice one! Yeah! Okay.
I'll follow you.
Check it out. Boop.
On the other end of the spectrum, it does feel a bit unwieldy when picking your way down the steepest and techiest lines, even with the mixed wheel setup. This is one of the areas the Da Vinci chainsaw outshined the Session. Slow speed moves and playfulness in the air are areas where the Session could be better, but that may hurt the bike for all-out speed, so there is always going to be a trade-off.
Tony?
Who's this bike for? The Session is for people that live near or at the base of the mountain, especially if that person aspires to race or be the fastest one in their group. Until now, I have not owned a Session that survived a season without a large dent in the down tube or a cracked swing arm. The new Session, I can confidently say, is much more durable, and that is a huge improvement over the outgoing bike. If your favorite trails skew more wide open DH tracks, or you're still working on bigger and bigger jumps, this is the right DH bike for you. Final thoughts. It's really cool to see some more variation in downhill bikes. It is also good to see more attention put towards making bikes durable, rather than lightweight, especially for the average rider. Speed is more accessible, and the bike parks are getting rowdier as the bikes become more capable. If you're picking off techie shoots and drops, the Session may not be the right option. Check out the Da Vinci Chainsaw or the Rocky Mountain Slayer. That said, it's fully capable, but the Session does prefer speed to precision. Some of us are too old or don't have time to race. However, Trek's new Session, Commensal's new Supreme, and Intense just dropped details of their new M1. These bikes are bringing World Cup performance and speed to the masses. If you want a race bike with the newest World Cup credentials that's still available to the public, check out the Session.